Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So excited to share some ideas with you guys today, some ideas about parents, some ideas about schools. But first, I got to tell you some personal news. So yesterday, my wife and I celebrated our 10-year anniversary. Yeah, 10 years, I know. So very exciting. Congratulations, especially to her. Because, nothing says romance like getting to hear your spouse give a lecture, right? One that you've heard practiced like 35 times already. But it's given me the occasion, to think back on those 10 years and to think about the time, especially the time before we had kids, when it was just she and I, and we got to do things like go to the movies and, now, instead of just having a sidekick and a wingman, I've got these three minions following around behind me. And it's a beautiful thing, right? They're beautiful, but life changes when you have kids. I mean, that is the truth. It's 1 minute you go from debates about politics to just a fiery debate about cloth versus disposable diapers. And you take a step back and you think, oh my goodness, am I becoming one of those dreaded helicopter parent headlines? Oof. More on that in a minute. I think it's a universal thing to say life changes when you have kids. And you don't have to have kids to know that, right? You've probably been in the situation where you're like, oh, great, here come the Mitchells again on their once-a-quarter date. Now we got to hear about their kids all night, Or you've been on the other side of that and you're like, hey, guys, we're on our quarterly date. Who wants to hear about our kids? I think it's universal that life changes in dramatic ways when you have kids. And I think that parents of those children universally believe that we have got to get them a great education for them to be set up for success later on in life. So we do what we can. We do our best to teach them, whether it's letters and numbers, and we read to them at night. We show them how to cross the street safely. But over time, parental involvement, it changes. I think as other interests emerge, as schools position themselves as being the greatest driver in a kid's educational process. And to me, the question isn't really whether or not parents or schools are more important in that process. It's how do we work together to make sure that every kid is getting a great education. When I was a kid, my mom used to say, with a great education, I could do anything. And I think she believed that. But the thing about my mom is that she's only 4 feet 11 inches tall. And so I'm pretty sure she knew my chances of going to the NBA were slim. So she kept lots of books around, right? She hedged. So growing up in the 80s, my sister and I were what they called latchkey kids. Our parents both worked, and so many times we came home to an empty house, and it was up to us to start our homework and keep ourselves entertained and generally just not kill each other. And in part as a result, as a response to being latchkey kids, when many of those adults became parents themselves, the pendulum really swung. And despite what you might think, parents of every socioeconomic level started spending more and more time with their kids. So in 2007, 2 non-college educated parents spent 9 more hours per week with their child. The number's even higher for college educated parents. And this isn't just about privilege or about class. Right? Data shows that parents across the board are over anxious about the safety and the success of their children. All of a sudden, we needed a new word for these parents that hover over their kids, that helicopter parents that term was born. And often that has a really negative connotation. I mean, you hear these horror stories about some dad who calls a college professor to haggle over a grade on the term paper for a 20-year-old, or parents that don't want to let their kids experience any risk in life. And of course, as a parent myself, I scoffed at the idea. I said, I am not a helicopter parent. That's not me. I mean, so what if I make sure that my girls all wear those swim floaties in the bathtub? I mean, hey, it's deep in those streets. You don't know what could happen in there. Right? Guys, the reality is that in 2017, we are all so much closer to being helicopters than we'd like to admit. Technology gives us the ability to check in almost nonstop. The teachers in my 2-year-old's class, they post pictures to a closed group so that we can see what our kids were up to that day. There are some daycares that have a camera, in the corner of the room, so parents can be that sort of eye in the sky. I had an app on my phone that let me check in to see whether or not my daughter had a dirty diaper. If you're new to kids, can I just tell you that you don't need an app. It's not really that hard to tell whether or not your kid has a dirty diaper. It's not. It's not. The point is that parents today, more than any other parents throughout history, are engaged in the lives of their kids. It just looks different than it did generations ago. Right? But unfortunately, that engagement and energy has not translated into success for our students in schools. So before we ask why not, I want to show you guys some images. So what you're seeing now on the left-hand side are the Olympic medal count from the 2016 games in Rio. You can see the U.S. is dominant. On your right, you're looking at scores from the 2015 administration of the PISA. It's the Program for International Student Assessment. It's a math, reading, and science test. It's given to 60 countries. And we're not at the top. In fact, we would be off the page. We're ranked 35th. What in the world is happening? Well, there's factors beyond what I've got time for today. So I'm going to focus on how the two groups, in this case, schools and sports, involve parents in the process. So here's an easy question. Quick show of hands. So who attended school at some point in their life? Okay, easy question, right? All right, now, next show of hands. Who at some point played an organized sport? Yeah, good. So census data would say that about 35% of us should have had our hands up both times. And I bet for those of you who raised your hands both times, that during the season, your parents spent more time at games and practices than they did talking to your teachers. Does that ring true? And the people who coach those teams know that one of the best things you can do is to effectively deputize the parents. If you don't want a whole sideline of people ringing in your ears about game time decisions, you give them something to do, right? So you show them drills they can work on with this group of kids. You show them skills they can reinforce during the week with their child. The coaches and the parents build the kids up. But what does that look like in the school setting? So I'm a school administrator, and I can tell you we have lots and lots of education jargon, but we rarely break it down in a way that allows parents to take those tools and reinforce instruction at home. It's more often the case that if a mom says she wants to be involved, we send her to the bake sale steering committee or back to the athletic fields. Right. The point is that where parent involvement is expected and invited, our kids perform at world-class levels. But where no framework exists to channel that energy, our kids flounder. But I think we can change that. I think we can change that narrative. You guys want to hear some ideas about how? Yeah. All right, so anybody who's carried a cell phone for any length of time knows about the phenomenon of the phantom buzz, right? Some of you probably, in the time we've been in here, you pulled out your phone because you thought you were getting a notification about being tagged at this sweet TED Talk, only to find, no likes, nothing, right? Guys, I want schools to sense the constant buzzing of parents. I want faculty members to think, what would change right now if I knew that parents were watching me? The tone that I use in my classroom? My lesson planning, my preparation? Would my expectations of what this student can do change if I knew that her dad wouldn't leave me alone until she was reaching that potential? I think schools have got to embrace those swarming helicopters, right? For a number of reasons. First, we're on the same team. Families and faculty are both in the child advocacy game. And second, we know that kids progress faster when we're pushing together. And finally, and don't miss this point, parents can hold schools accountable. I work with some very committed educators, but nobody cares about their kids like parents. So I wanna tell you about two schools in the city where I live, Nashville. These are two public high schools. They are separated by 1.3 miles. One school has an academic eligibility requirement to get in. The other school is open to any kid who lives in the neighborhood. So last year, at that first school, 98% of the kids were prepared for college. At the second school, only 4% were ready for college. They're only separated by 1.3 miles, so what's happening? Well, yeah, obviously there's the academic eligibility requirement, but I think there's something deeper. I would contend that one thing happening, one difference, is how the schools react to perceived parent pressure. Okay? Here's what I mean. At that high-performing school, when a teacher sees that a student is struggling to reach his potential, that teacher can practically hear those choppers overhead, right? But does that same expectation exist at the low-performing school? I don't think it does, even though, as we saw, all parents have some helicopter in them. So one challenge that I have for all schools, low-performing, high-performing, is to have some self-imposed accountability. Right? A teacher's got to be willing to ask himself, do I believe that this student has the same potential as the one down the street? Not a hard question. Doesn't take data, doesn't take a philosophy about generational poverty. Do I truly believe that this student has the same potential as the one down the street? And if faculty won't ask that question, then families should not be ashamed to ask it of them. Do you believe that my kid has the same potential as the one down the street? And if you do, show me. Show me what my kid knows. Don't just tell me how cute she is. Guys, schools and school boards have to remove barriers to meaningful parent engagement. Invite questions about academic and college readiness. That's how schools can start to regain some of the trust that's been lost over the years. So here's a couple ideas for what that might look like. Have a space in the school that's designed for parents. Sounds simple enough. I mean, too often when a parent comes up to school to talk to a school leader or a teacher, they get summoned to the principal's office. Right? I did not like that as a child. I do not appreciate it now. Right? How much better to come to a space that's more like two colleagues sitting down for coffee than somebody stepping into the interrogation room. Here's another one. Get parents involved in the hiring process. Who better to determine whether or not a candidate truly values parent engagement than an actual parent? HR professionals, I'd love for you to work with schools, help us develop a system to better incorporate parent feedback into the process. Finally, schools, we've got to cut through some of that education jargon. You know, we've got to equip parents to ask better questions of us. Right? And I know this is possible because I've seen it, especially with parents of students with special needs. Man, these parents have often become expert, not just in their students' diagnosis, but in how to navigate a very complicated system of federal and state laws. We've got to do the same thing for all parents. Equip parents with the ability to ask better questions of us, right? If that takes having a monthly community meeting on how to read your child's report card, great. Do it. If it takes recording a 90-second video on how to take sight words home and use those at home, great. Do it. The schools that fail to incorporate meaningful parent engagement are going to continue to work so hard and wonder why they're achieving such meager results. A couple years ago, I had the real pleasure to be part of a team that opened 2 schools in back-to-back years. And as we were preparing to open that first school, you know, we're doing all the things you do. You hire teachers, you get supplies and all that. The time came to name the school, and we did just that. We gave it a name. It's a directional name. It's not very exciting, blah. The school opened. Well, a year later, it was time to name that second school. And we did something a little bit different. We opened up the process to parents. And I gotta tell you that felt a little bit risky at the time, right? hey guys, you guys come and name the school. But we opened up the process to parents, and something beautiful happened. Parents at that school, they named it United Academy. United. Because at that school, families come from over 20 countries around the world. And they liked this idea that they were coming from around the world to unite under the banner of getting their kids a great education. Right? United Academy. So you fast forward, that second school has higher parent participation than the first school. It has higher parent satisfaction than the first school. And importantly, even though that first school had some of the highest academic growth in the city, the second school had stronger growth. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that naming the school is a silver bullet. Right? And I'm also not saying that our schools are perfect. We're working hard every day to get better and better for our kids. But what I am saying is that we saw some tangible benefits because we had an orientation towards parent engagement that was baked right into the school from day one. We saw that. So let me try to land this thing. Guys, I have now experienced schools as a student and as an educator, as a school administrator, but most importantly, as a parent. And you don't have to be a parent to deliver great instruction, but being a parent has added color to something that previously I knew only as somebody who worked in schools. And that's that parents can have a tremendous impact on how our schools as institutions thrive. And if as educators, we truly believe in the potential of every kid to succeed, every kid, regardless of color, regardless of income, regardless of gender or ability or zip code or any of the other dozens of wedges that currently drive between us. If we want to affirm the dignity and the potential of every child to be their best, then we have got to grab onto these helicopter parents and let them lift our schools to new heights. Thank you.